Okay, good morning.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Okay, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Dear angels,
Good morning, doctor.
good morning. Do you have any question before we proceed?
No.
No, doctor, all clear.
Okay. Okay, last time I left the discussion off at how to quote, right?
Yes.
Yes, doctor, right.
And I said when you quote, it means that you present the exact ideas of the original source as they are. So here you don't have to change anything. So when you quote, you enclose the exact words of the original source within quotation marks. I also said sometimes you may introduce minor changes into the quote if you want to make the quote, or if you want to work the quote or incorporate it into your paper, i.e. into your paragraph or into your sentences. And I gave you the example, we opt for democracy in our country, right? And I said, if you want to quote this statement, you may use that or you may not use that. So if you don't use that, you say Achebe, because the statement is taken from Achebe. You say Achebe says, comma, quote, we opt, and you have to capitalize the W, for democracy in our country. And if you use that, you don't need to use a comma. So you say Achebe maintains that. So here you can't say Achebe maintains that we opt. So you have to make changes. So here it becomes Achebe maintains that the Nigerians, so you replace we with Nigerians. So here you make a change. But the change is written before the quotation mark. Achebe maintains that the Nigerians, quote, opt for democracy in their country. So you change our to their. And you write it within square brackets. So the square brackets show your reader that this is a change that you have introduced into the quote. Okay? And at the end, you have to document. So if you are a language student, you write within parentheses lowercase p and the number of the page. If you are a literature student, you write only the number of the page. You don't need to use the lowercase p. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, so when you quote, you may change something in the quote. And when you change it, you have to enclose the change within square brackets. I mentioned this last time. Now, sometimes you may want to omit a phrase or a sentence, maybe two sentences. Okay, how are you going to do it then? Now, if you want to omit a phrase or a sentence from a quote, you have to indicate the omission by using ellipses. Ellipses, E-double-L-I-P-S-E-S. It is the plural of ellipses. Ellipses, S-I-S. What does it mean? So here, when you omit something, you write 3 spaced periods within square brackets. This is the ellipses. Okay? And I think you have an example in the book. Do you have the book with you? It is on page
Yes.
Yes,
72.
we have our books, doctor.
Okay. It is on page 72. Towards the middle of the page, you have number 3. To omit some portion from the middle of a quotation, use ellipses, 3 spaced dots. Okay, i.e. 3 spaced periods. So a period, you click a space, another period, you click a space, another period, you click a space. Okay? So this is the meaning of spaced dots. Place brackets around the ellipses to distinguish them from other spaced periods you occasionally see in a source. What does it mean? So it means that in the source text, you may have ellipses. You may already have 3 spaced dots. So to distinguish your ellipses from these 3 dots, you have to write your 3 dots within square brackets. So when I read it, I realize that you, my student, have omitted a statement from the original. Here you have an example. Be sure when you omit words that you do not distort the original meaning. I.e., you don't have to change the meaning when you omit something. If you don't know how to omit, I advise you not to omit. Okay? Because sometimes you may quote a sentence and you omit a part of that sentence. When you omit a part of that sentence, the sentence loses its status as a sentence, i.e. it no longer sounds as a sentence. Okay? So in this case, the meaning becomes unclear. So if you don't know how to omit, if you don't know how to preserve the meaning that you want to communicate, don't omit anything. This is number 1. Number 2, you are not allowed to write the first word of the quote and the last word of the quote, and then you write some 10 spaced dots to show me that you are using ellipses. No, this is wrong. this doesn't mean that you know how to use ellipses. And usually students in this course in particular write the first word of the quote and the last word and they add 3 dots or 4 dots. This is unacademic. And if you do it on the exam, you will lose 5 points for every type, for every kind of mistake like this one. Believe me, in this course, I will take every single technique into account. So I advise you now not to write the first word and the last word and separate them with ellipses. This is not academic. Okay? So if you don't know how to use ellipses, don't use ellipses at all. Now here we have an example. The source reads as follows. Professional sport is in fact no more violent than it used to be. Okay? Now here in the source you have in fact. In fact is not important. So if you omit it, you don't change the meaning. You don't distort the meaning of the sentence. So you can omit it. Ellipses, quotation with ellipses, professional sport is, then you have 3 spaced dots enclosed within square brackets. No more violent than it used to be. This is how you use ellipses. But you can't write, let's say, professional, 3 dots, then B, unquote. This is unacademic, and I don't allow it in my classes.
Doctor,
Yes.
so it's best to write all the code without missing any word.
Of course, if you don't know how to omit, don't omit.
Okay.
Because when you may end up writing a fragment or a phrase, and in this case the meaning becomes unclear to the reader. Okay, you have a question. Someone was going to say something. You have any question? Okay. Another example, you have the ellipses at the end of the quote. It is a poorly kept NFL secret that hooliganism increases during Monday night games, which when played in the East start at the relatively late hour of 9 p.m. to accommodate West Coast TV viewers. Okay? Now in the following quote, to accommodate West Coast TV viewers is omitted. Okay? So it is omitted at the end of the quote. So that's why you have 3 spaced dots within square brackets, and then you have the period, i.e. the last, i.e. the end of the sentence. So the period means that this is the end of the sentence. You can use it at the end of the quote. Okay? So we use square brackets to introduce or to indicate a change that we have introduced into a quote. This is number 1. Okay, you may write down. The square brackets are used to indicate a change that you have made in a quote. This is the first use of square brackets. The second use is that you use the square brackets to show your readers that you have omitted something. Okay? And the third use is that you may add something to the quote, i.e. you take a quote, you realize that a certain idea or statement is not clear. So you find yourself forced to clarify that point. So you may need to add a word or a phrase. So you have to write it also within square brackets. So the square brackets indicate a change. This is number one. Number two, an omission. Number three, an addition. Okay? The square brackets indicate a change or an omission or an addition. I sent it to you by WhatsApp. Okay?
Okay.
So if you change something, you have to write it within square brackets. If you omit something, you indicate the omission by typing 3 space dots within square brackets. And if you add something, you include what you have added within square brackets. Now, at the end of page 72, we have a source or a quote taken from a source. And on the following page, we have something added to it. The OTA awarded a contract to the UCLA, School of Public Health, for a study of adverse effects of Agent Orange on American ground troops in Vietnam. Now, the OTA is not clear. Okay, I, as a reader, don't know what OTA stands for. So you, as a writer, quoting this sentence, should clarify what OTA means. Okay, so that's why within square brackets you write what it means directly after this acronym. We call it acronym. This is not an abbreviation. We don't call it an abbreviation. We call it an acronym. ACRONYM. Okay, so on the following page, we come across what OTA means. Now, quotation with addition. The OTA, and within square brackets, we read Office of Technology Assessment. So when we write Office of Technology Assessment after the acronym OTA, I know that you are telling me what the acronym stands for. Okay, the OTA, Office of Technology Assessment, awarded a contract to the UCLA School of Public Health for a study of adverse effects of Agent Orange on American ground troops in Vietnam. Okay, so this is how we use square brackets within a quote. Is it clear?
Yes, doctor, it's clear. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
very clear.
Okay, now sometimes the quote is a long quote. How are you going to quote it in your paper? Okay, now if you are a literature student, the long quote should have more 5 or more than lines. Okay? The MLA students or the literature students should count the number of the lines that the quote runs into. So if the quote consists of 5 or runs into 5 or more lines, you have to set it off. Set it off. Set S-E-T off O-double-F. I will explain what it means. And if you are a language student, you have to number the words of the quote. If your quote includes 40 or more words, you have to set it off. Okay, I will give you an example. For example, you can say, suppose that you are writing a paper on Macbeth, since I have memorized a long quote from Macbeth. Suppose you are writing a paper on Macbeth, and you are going to quote Macbeth's soliloquy that starts tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Okay? So suppose you are going to quote his statement, life is but a walking shadow. Okay? So it is long. I think it is longer than 6 or 5 lines. Okay? So life is but a walking shadow. I think this is the first line. A poor player that struts and frets. The second line. His hour upon the stage. The third. And then is heard no more, for it is a tale told by an idiot. This is number 5. Full of sound and fury. 6. Signifying nothing. 7. I will write it down, and you have to write it down, and I will send it to you by WhatsApp. So you can do the following. You can say that Macbeth, you have to introduce your quote, says, and because the quote is a long quote, after says you have to use a colon, not a comma. Okay? If the quote is a long quote that you have to set off, you have to add a colon after the introducing verb, i.e. after says. If the quote is short and is incorporated into your sentence or into your paragraph, you use a comma after says. Okay? So here you write, Macbeth says, colon, and you have to set off your quote, i.e. you have to start a new line. Okay, so what does it mean to set it off? To set it off means that you have to indent 10 spaces at the beginning of every line of the quote. Write down. To set off a long quote, you have to indent, i.e. to skip 5 spaces at the beginning of each line of the set off quote. Okay? So at the beginning of the semester, I told you you have to skip 5 spaces at the beginning of each paragraph. Okay? Now when you have a set of quote, you have to skip 10 spaces, i.e. 10 clicks, since you are typing on the computer. So Macbeth says, I will write it down. 1. You may write 10 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to indicate 10 spaces. Macbeth says, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Period. It is a tale told by an idiot. Full new line of sound and fury, new line signifying nothing. Period, and after the period you write, I think this is Act 5, because it is the end of the play. Let's say Scene 6. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. Let's say these are lines 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 57. So I write 50-57. And there is no period after the parenthetical citation. Okay? So this is an indented quote. We call it an indented or set of quote. A set of quote. Or an indented quote. I will send it to you.
Doctor,
Yes.
if the quote is longer than 2 lines, we consider it long?
2 lines.
Yes.
I said if it is 5 or more.
Okay.
5. If you type it and you find that it runs into 5 or more lines, you have to set it off. Okay, I've just sent it to you. Have a look at it. Okay? So Macbeth, let's say, is the beginning of the line or the end of the previous line, I don't mind. Says, did you get it?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, colon, then you start a new line. So I wrote 10 dots. I didn't copy all of the dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, they should be 10. I will do it again.
Doctor?
Wait a minute. Okay, so here you have Macbeth says colon. Because the quote is a long quote, you have to use a colon after the introducing verb, not a comma. This is number one. Number two, since it is a set of quote, I wrote at the top, set of quote or indented quote, you have to skip then 10 spaces at the beginning of each line. Here I wrote or I inserted 10 dots to show you that these are 10 spaces. Okay? So you have 10 spaces from the very beginning of the quote till the very end. This is number one. Number two, when you have a set of quote, you don't need to use quotation marks. Here I didn't use the quotation marks at the beginning. Do you have quotation marks? ما في حاجة. When you set off your quote, you don't need to enclose it within quotation marks, i.e. you don't need to use quotation marks. And at the end, you add the punctuation mark full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, period. And after the period, you write within parentheses the page number, if it is a book or a novel, or the act and the scene and the line numbers as I did here. So capital V is Act 5, lowercase vi at scene 6, 50 to 57, these are the lines that I have quoted. And you don't need a period after the parenthetical citation. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, now the language students count the words. So if they are 40, you have to set the quote off. If the words are less than 40, you don't need to set the quote off. Okay, you were going to say something. What is it?
Can I ask something?
I said go on, you have a question.
What about documentation for language students? We use the same documentation that you wrote?
Of course, I said this last time. This is a play.
Okay, thank you.
This is a verse play. Okay? So you skip 10 spaces at the beginning of each line. You don't use quotation marks at all. You add the period at the end of the quote. After the period, the language students should skip 1 space. The literature students should skip 2 spaces. And they should write within parentheses the number of the act, the number of the scene, and the number of the lines, as I sent it to you. So you have to imitate the example that I have sent to you. Is it clear?
Yes, very clear, Doctor. Thank you.
Okay. Now sometimes you have what we call a quote within a quote. Okay? Write it down, please. I will explain it to you. A quote within a quote. For example, suppose you are quoting, let's say, 2 or 3 sentences from a book. And within these 3 sentences, you find something written within quotation marks. Okay? So one of these 3 sentences, or a phrase of these 3 sentences, may be written within quotation marks. So in this case, what you have within quotation marks is a quote within the quote that you are going to write. Is it clear?
Yes.
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 I will try to write my example other than the one that you have in the book. Suppose I want to quote Richard Ellman. I may write the following. I will write the sentence down, then I will send it to you. According to Ellman, double L, comma, quote, let's say, Oscar Wilde is a Victorian playwright who aims to be a member of the aristocracy. That's why he has, let's say, in Ellman's statement we have he has lived in London. In other words, he has aspired to be an active member of the London aristocracy. Okay? Period. So I suppose I have taken this statement from Richard Ellman. Okay? Richard Ellman. Oscar Wilde is a Victorian playwright who aims to be a member of the aristocracy. That's why he has. So here, has lived in London is a quote that Richard Ellman has taken from a source. So he has written it within quotation marks. Then he wrote, in other words, he has aspired to be an active member of the London aristocracy. Now you want to write a paper on Oscar Wilde, and you want to quote this statement that Richard Ellman says. How are you going to do it? So you can do the following. I will write it again. According to Ellman, comma, quote, Oscar Wilde is a Victorian playwright who aims to be a member of the aristocracy. Period. That is why he, and after he I use single quotation marks. Okay? I have single quotation marks. He, single quotation mark, has lived in London, period, single quotation mark, unquote, in other words. In other words, he has aspired to be an active member of the London aristocracy, unquote. Here I use double quotation marks, then within parentheses I write the number of the page. So if you are language, you write P and the number of the page, let's say 10. Then period. This is language. Okay, I sent it to you. Have a look at it. Okay, so suppose the first paragraph is a sentence or two, is a statement by Richard Ellman. It is made up of 1, 2, 3 sentences. So I took from Ellman's book the following. Oscar Wilde is a Victorian playwright who aims to be a member of the aristocracy. So far, these are the words of Richard Ellman. That is why he, again, Richard Ellman's words, has lived in London. So, has lived in London is written within quotation marks. So, Richard Ellman wrote, has lived in London because he has taken it from a certain source. In other words, he has aspired to be an active member of the London aristocracy. Okay, so I take this statement as it is. I quote it in my paper. So I say the following, according to Ellman, comma. Then I use double quotation marks at the beginning of the quote, right? Are you looking at it?
Yes, doctor.
Okay.
Yes.
So according to Ellman, comma, you use double quotation marks at the beginning of the quote. Oscar Wilde is a Victorian playwright who aims to be a member of the aristocracy. That's why he, then you have a single quotation mark. Can you find it?
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Has lived in London, period, then a single quotation mark. So what is written within single quotation marks is called a quotation within a quotation. Right down, right next to it, I have underlined it, right? So this is a quote within a quote. So when you have a quote within a quote, you have to write it within single, not double, single quotation marks. Period, unquote. In other words, he has aspired to be an active member of the London aristocracy, unquote. Here you have double quotation marks. Then within parentheses, you mention the page number. So if you are a language student, you write P. Then if you are a literature student, you don't need P. And at the end, you add the period. Is it clear?
Very clear, doctor.
Okay, so this is a quote within a quote. Now, if you have something underlined or italicized in a quote, you have also to underline it and to italicize it. Don't omit the italicization or the underlining. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so if you take a
Yes,
statement,
doctor.
you quote it, and in the original text, a certain word or phrase or sentence of the quote is underlined or italicized, you have also to underline it and to italicize it. And if a word or a phrase is written within double quotation marks, you have to write it within single quotation marks. So you have to preserve the quote as it is. Okay, so there are certain techniques. So when you have something underlined in an original text or italicized or written within quotation marks, it means that the author wants to say something. It may be something important for him. So it means that he wants to comment on the underlined words or phrases or on what he has written within quotation marks. So you have to preserve them. Okay? So you have to keep it as it is. Okay? Then number 7 in the book. When you work the quotation into your paper with an introduction containing the word that, and I mentioned this before, if you use that after says, the first word of the quote is not capitalized unless it is a proper noun. And I mentioned this. So if it is a proper noun, you have to capitalize. There is no way out. And if you don't use that, the first word of the quote should be capitalized, even if it is not capitalized in the source. And you have the examples. Example with that. Smith says that few is not capitalized. The F is not capitalized. Adolescents feel secure. Now, example without that. Smith says, comma, quote, capitalize the F. Few adolescents feel secure. And I have already mentioned this. Okay? Now, you don't have to overuse says. Okay? We have a variety of introducing verbs. Okay? So you have to use this variety. So you can use, write them down. Say, claim, contend, believe, think, argue. Okay? So don't overuse say. You have to use a variety of introducing verbs. This is number 1. Number 2, the introducing verb should be written in the present. You can't say Shakespeare said. You cannot say Shakespeare claimed. You cannot say Shakespeare maintained. Use the simple present or any present tense. So you can say Shakespeare maintains that. Is it clear?
Sorry, doctor, can you repeat the last word? What should we say?
I said, when you introduce a quote you have to use an introducing verb, like says, or say, or contend, or believe, or think, or maintain, or argue, or discuss, and what have you. So in other words, don't overuse the verb say. يعني مش بكل ما تكتب quote تحط he says. Use says once. Use contend another time. Use maintain the third time. Use claim the fourth. Use believe. Use think. Use argue. Okay? So this is what I'm saying. Is it clear, Najib?
Doctor?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, go on.
But with words like claims or believes, can we use them without that?
Of course you can. Comma, quote, capitalize. Or you can use that. It's up to you. It depends on the flow of your ideas. Okay? You can say Shakespeare maintains that life is a walking shadow. Period. You can do it. And you can say Shakespeare maintains, comma, life is a walking shadow. Okay? Now, if the quote is a long quote, you'd better not use that. Okay? The verb, colon, then you start a new line. You start off your quote. And if you feel that if you need to use that, use that. I'm not saying that don't use that. I said you can use either that or no that. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, doctor.
Yes.
Okay, so I said we take information from secondary sources and we work them into our papers either through paraphrasing or summarizing or quoting. So these are three methods of incorporating the secondary source information into our papers. And as I told you, you have to write an outline. When I discussed how to write an essay, I showed you how to write an outline. So at the beginning of every research paper, you should write an outline because the outline shows you how to organize your ideas. The outline shows you how to organize your ideas. So you can't write the paper, then you write the outline. This is number one. Now the outline is important because when you write an outline for an essay or for a research paper, you acquire the skill of writing a table of contents for an MA thesis. So at the beginning of your essay or your research paper, you write an outline. But at the beginning of your MA thesis or your PhD dissertation, or at the beginning of a book that you may publish in the future, you have to write a table of contents. You don't write an outline. Okay? So the table of contents that you write for your MA thesis is similar to the outline that you write for your research paper. It is a detailed table of contents, but instead of calling it an outline, you have to call it a table of contents. So you start a new page, and at the top, you write table of contents. Is it clear?
Doctor?
Yes.
Doctor, can I ask you something?
Yes, go on.
During the exam, will you ask us to write the outline, or it's just for us?
I may ask you to write an outline. It depends. At the end of the semester, I will tell you what you have to do at the exam.
Yes, doctor. Thank you.
Okay? Okay. Okay, so when you write a table of contents for your MA thesis, you have to add titles like introduction, then chapter 1, and then you have to write a mini outline for chapter 1, then chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, conclusion. So in the table of contents, you have to use titles like chapters. Okay? So that's why you have to write an outline. Now, what you have, okay, what do you have to document? Okay? So there are things that you don't need to document when you write in your research paper or in your MA thesis. Okay? Now, if you quote something that is considered a common fact, you don't need to document it. For example, you can say the earth is round. The earth is round is a common fact. All of us agree that the earth is round. So you don't need to write it within quotation marks, and then you document it. You can, let's say, write Jum'ah, page 15. You don't need it. This is common fact. Now, proverbs, sayings that are familiar to people should not be documented. Okay? So if you mention a proverb, you don't need to document it. Okay, so what you have to document is everything that is related to opinions, to ideas, to experiments done by other people. You have to document statistics. You may quote, if you are working on language, you may write a research paper on something related to language. And it so happens that the source that you are drawing on has quoted, let's say, statistics. So the statistics that you quote should be documented. You should tell your reader where you got these pieces of information. Okay? Eyesight facts should not be documented. Okay, so you don't have to document, let's say, the date of the birth of William Shakespeare or the date of his death. These are common facts. Now, in literature, we don't expect you, let's say, to use proverbs. I ask my students not to use proverbs and sayings in their papers. Okay? Now, how to document? Okay, so next time, I taught you how to introduce a borrowing. You have borrowed something, so you write, he says, he maintains, he claims. You write the quote within quotation marks, but you can't write a paraphrase or a summary within quotation marks. And at the end, you mention the page number. Okay, now next time I will teach you how to write a list of works cited. Okay, now MLA students or literature students have to write at the end of their research papers or MA theses a list of works cited. So they start a new page. You don't write it directly at the end of the research paper. Okay, so you can't write the list of works cited following the last paragraph of your research paper. Even if you have a long space, skip it. You have to start a new page, and at the top of the page, in the center, you write works cited There should be a title, and the title is called Works Cited. You have to capitalize the W, you have to capitalize the C, and you don't have to add a period. After titles and names and periods and dates, you don't have to use periods. So you write works cited at the top of the page, and then you have to list the sources from A to Z according to the family names of the authors. Okay, so the list of works cited lists all the sources, but you have to start with the name of the author. And in this case, you start with the family name of the author. Okay? And the students of language should write a list of references. So they start a new page, and at the top, in the middle of the page, they write references, and the R should be capitalized. Okay? And the sources should be listed in an alphabetical order, i.e. you should proceed from A to Z according to the family names of the author. So next time, I will teach you how to write a list of references or works cited. I will leave the discussion off at this point. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Odir.
Okay, thank you. Next time, i.e. on Thursday, we will discuss Sylvia Plath's Daddy, D-A-D-D-Y. This is the second poem that we will discuss in this course. So I will send it to you by WhatsApp. And I think it is available online. So you may download the poem, read it, try to understand it. The poem is a feminist poem. We can analyze it from a feminist point of view. Okay, so the methodology for analyzing this poem is the feminist literary theory. Okay, so read the feminist theory that I have dictated to you before you read the poem. Then read the poem and try to understand what the lady wants to say in this poem. So we will discuss it in detail on Thursday, and if we have time, I will teach you how to write a list of references or works cited. In other words, bibliography notes. Do you have any questions? No more questions?
No, Doctor. No.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Not at all. Okay, we will meet on Thursday, God willing. Okay? So the class is,
See you, Doctor.
okay, the class is dismissed.